Hello and welcome to the Tapas and Pretzels podcast, the 12th in that case. And so welcome David, welcome Tin. And we also have another guest, Markus Mueller. So if you don't know who Markus Mueller is, Markus Mueller is the CTO of APIIDA or APIIDA, I guess. That is a company that is also specialized on API management, but also on the topic which we will discuss today. So hello and welcome, Markus. Nice to see you. So, Markus, I have a question for you. You or your company are currently working on one of the newest topics, I would say, that's Federated API Gateways. But what I've also noticed, because we also saw, or we have seen us at the API days, but what I've noticed is that there's not so much talk about this topic at the moment. So my question is, why is it that? But why should companies actually care about this? So can you perhaps give us a little insight to this topic, or you just can start.
Sure. So first of all, thanks for having me. And by the way, the company name is pronounced APIIDA with a long I. That topic of federated API management, federated gateways. I think we started talking about that and actually doing that, I think, in 2021. So my first appearance in API days in Paris that year, it wasn't even called Federated API Management. So also the name has been set in recent years. And I think the reason why it's not talked about so much until now, so I think now is the time where it shifts towards being more of a topic and being more noticed. The reason for that is because it elevates API management from the gateway level to a more strategic level. So we are all about managing APIs, and we don't, in Federation, you don't care what API gateway is running. And that, of course, contradicts with the logic that has been applied in the past, that you choose your gateway, and your gateway comes with tooling, and you use that tooling and that gateway and build your processes on top of that. So, of course, the different gateway vendors don't have a reason to talk about federation, because they need to tell their customers that their gateway actually is the best one. So they don't have to look left or right to other gateways. And I think that is the gateway vendors are still the players in the API management industry that have most of the money and most of the market share. So of course for them it's easier to direct where the public, where the attention goes, by just being able to put more money into marketing. But I think we're at a tipping point there. So this year at API Days in Paris, it was not only us talking about federation, or for example Gartner. So Mark O'Neill of Gartner usually uses the phrase "bring your own gateway" API management for that. But first time this year, several others talked about the topic as well. So I think we will see that a lot more in the marketplace.
What I also have seen by attending the API days, by the talk of Gartner just also released their new hype cycle for APIs, and I've seen the topic of API or federated API gateways is currently in the innovation trigger side, actually before it hits the peak. So it is, and it's also, I think, marked in a 2 year, no, in a 5 to 10 year range when it's gonna hit the peak. Can you explain it? Why is that the case? And I think it's, for me, it sounds very logical and a near-term topic, but what do you think? Why is it so far away?
I think the reason for that is just when you look at federation, who are the first companies to run into problems that can be solved with federation? And that is mostly the bigger companies, right? So, and of course, these are slower to adopt new technology. A lot of enterprise-grade companies, and also a lot of our customers, they really try to get moving faster. But it's still, the bigger the company, the slower they are able to use or to move. So I think that is one of the reasons. And the other reason is there are only very few players in that niche at the moment, right? So I'd argue there are only a handful who are like, for example, directly competing with us, for example. So I think what Gartner is expecting is that more of like the big names will enter that playing field as well. And until they say, okay, now it reached mass adoption, it probably, will be the case when almost every API management solution out there is federated. So I think that explains like their timescale. But honestly, I absolutely agree with you. The problems are there now, and we are able to solve them now. And we have customers that need them to be solved now and not in 5 years or 10 years. So I think that is a bit on the conservative side from Gartner.
Okay, and I have a question. Is federation means the interaction between API gateways from different providers, right? So which are the main pain points you find in that kind of integration?
Yeah, so it depends on like where the customers are in the adoption of API management. So, for example, if you have like companies that were very early in adopting API management, most of them had their own data centers. They had some very big API management infrastructures. Um, Mostly, what is considered today a bit on the legacy side, and they start, of course, as everyone, to move in the cloud. And now they have Lambdas running or any other workload, cloud native workload. So it's natural to also choose the cloud native API management. And that leaves them now with their on-prem infrastructure and their cloud infrastructure. And now they need to manage both API interfaces or both API management systems at the same time. So that's where basically they start to see the benefit. I think that's the one category of pain points, just like moving to the cloud, hybrid installations. Of course, you always have things like mergers and acquisitions. So you're running whatever API gateway, you acquire a second company, they run something different. And especially what I think also drives this change to federation is that APIs are more and more considered to be a product on or as themselves. So you want to adequately manage your products, right? So they have a life cycle. You care about your developers, you care about your consumers, all that kinds of things. And that also means that you want like a unified platform, and you might want to abstract away the technology that platform runs on, because for everything you want to do essentially with APIs, like who has access, can I get access, where's the documentation, how is the style guide looking, it's completely irrelevant on what gateway it is running. So I think we see more of a shift from just the technical, how do I publish an API, to, okay, I published an API, and now what? How do I manage it? How do I make a product out of it?
You just said like you want to abstract these technology aspects of it, like, but what is, I mean, to abstract it, you need to hide all the complexity of all those API gateway vendors in the market. I think there's roughly about around 100 gateways in the market. What is the thing that would be most beneficial for you to build a great abstract layer to unify all the gateways? What would be the best thing that the industry could provide you?
I mean, the thing is with like unifying, of course, what would help a lot is the adoption of open standards. So I think once we got the open API spec, tooling really kind of like, let's say exploded, right? So there were a lot of tools coming out, a lot of interoperability. On the publishing side, we don't have something yet. So we are working on something like that. Probably others are as well, but just have a standard that everyone in the market understands and is willing to work with. So I think that would be like the biggest benefit, at least for publishing. The second part of managing a gateway is always like configuration management, right? So certificates and all that other stuff. How are your identity providers configured? All these kinds of different things. I don't think there will be something that's actually unifying that. So for us as a company, for example, that's most of the work we're doing, right? I mean, we also like build experiences on top of that, but getting the federation to work is really just going to gateway A, looking how they do it, adapt to their API, react on changes to their APIs, and then going to the next gateway and do it again and again and again. And I don't think there will be a shortcut.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and just to leave pristine clear what federation is. Do you think or do you consider that federation could solve this scenario, no? Which is using the API analytics module from one platform and the API gateway in another platform? You know.
That's a good question. So it would be great if you kind of like mix and match whatever you think suits the situation best, and to some extent you can. So because what you can do is like with that federation approach is that actually you just discover everything that's running, you discover all the APIs, you discover the analytics and all that kinds of things unified in one platform. And then of course you can basically use that accumulated data on any other platform you would like. So for example, you could move the analytics by using that federated abstraction layer to somewhere else. However, I don't think that we will actually arrive at a situation where like these, especially these full lifecycle tools that are like have a very big scope, that it is so modular that you can really just pick one item from it and say, okay, look, I like your governance approach, but I don't like the rest of your platform. So I think that kind of also like contradicts with the value proposition. If you buy an all-in-one system, you're basically the biggest value prop that there is. It's an all-in-one system, so you don't have any interfaces. It's just there. Everything works. So I don't think that we will arrive at a situation where you can actually mix. But what I think is the way to go is just gateways will become a commodity. And as Tim just said, there are hundreds of it, right? So they already are a commodity. It's just that some gateway vendors haven't noticed yet that it is like that. So it's just the gateway that is not the leading element anymore. It's not the source of truth. It's not your starting point for what you want to do. It's just that infrastructure element that gets the job done. So things will shift from these full lifecycle tools to just again full lifecycle, but for the API and not for the proxy running on a gateway. So I think that is where the shift will happen. It will be, the gateway will become just a technical necessity, but it's not the driving force anymore.
I agree, fully agree.
Yeah, totally agree. And just by chance, I don't know. I mean, since we are talking about APIIDA for a while, do you have some, I don't know, something that you can share with us how APIIDA looks like, so that our users probably, or our listeners or visitors or seers have a little understanding about what APIIDA's capabilities are? How can I imagine like this whole federation concept, and what could be benefits that I see out of this kind of solution?
Sure. So, I mean, we can just talk about it. We can have a look at it. It depends on you, what you would like to do. Yeah, from just a general like description standpoint, it's like, you know, like I mentioned. So you can connect any number of different environments. So right now we support, I think, 8 or 9 different gateway vendors, with more to come. And first thing is we extract all the information that are in. So APIs, existing API keys, applications, consumers, all that kind of stuff. And then we use this data to build experiences on top. So we have like a developer portal experience, right, where consumers can get access to APIs in full self-service. We have a governance experience where you get insights into how your APIs are built, down to the team level. So you could, for example, like analyze if there are certain teams that create more or less secure APIs than other teams. So these are like the kind of solutions in a nutshell that you can build with the technology that we have to offer. Yeah, and of course, if you want to, we can have a look What you should see right now is like the main view of our product. And to just give you an example, as I said, we're not doing a full-blown demo here, but just to get a feel for it. What we call environments. So in these environments, you basically can connect any type of API management service that you have on AWS, on Azure, Gravity, Broadcom, all different kinds. And as I said, we're discovering the APIs, and just for the sake of a demonstration, we put the icons of like where they came from here. And starting from that moment, every API is treated the same, no matter where its source is. And that also allows you to build, as I said, developer portals that mix and match every API that you have in your organization, right? So you can also build cross-platform products, all these kinds of things, including management of the subscriptions itself. So you can always also do things like monetization, applying different quotas, rate limits, basically whatever you come to expect from a good developer portal. The control plane allows you to do vendor agnostic. And to also give you an idea on what the governance part looks like, let's scroll down, there's a bit more color here. One thing we do is like for every API in the system, we assess its spec, Open API, Async API, whatever spec you have, on a custom style guide, custom rule set. We assess how they are configured on the gateway, so if any security policies are configured. And we build what we call security and quality score out of it. So just really simple to get, simple to track number. And that allows us to do these kinds of analytics that I mentioned. So for example, there's like one team that creates on average better APIs than the others. So you can go investigate why is that, things like that, right? You can get an information like which are the APIs that you want to look at first, which have the lowest scores, which APIs have not had traffic in the last 30 days, which APIs don't have any subscribers. So you can then actually put that all the data that you now have to work, right?
Quite powerful. I can imagine, like from a perspective, for example, of a CIO of a bigger group, it might be super interesting of getting rid of old unused APIs or get a better understanding of where he is in its actual maturity. I mean, there's maturity levels in PowerPoint, but it is an actual report on live systems. That's an awesome.
Yeah, exactly. So there's like, sometimes I just when I'm meeting with new customers or new prospects, I just ask them, so look, can you give me the number of how many APIs you have published to the internet? And then in the best case, it takes 5 to 10 minutes and they get the number. In the worst case, they start phoning 5 different teams that look after different systems and in the end start to build Excel tables.
Yeah.
So that's like, that's something I do from time to time. And like the next thing is then just simple questions like, hey, how do you know you want to shut down a certain consumer because it's just not a good citizen, right? So, I mean, people make mistakes. Developers build endless loops. They shouldn't, but they do every day somewhere in the world. So how can you stop that application from doing any cause? And then again, they start to make phone calls. And so that is like a very easy way to show people, hey, there is potential to get better. And as you said, right, so there are a lot of APIs. The original owners left the company. In some cases, no one even knows who the owner is for that API, but it's just a no-touch API, right? So no one knows what it does, but it's there, and people are just afraid to turn it off. And something like our solution that just, brings together all the information in one place is a good start to just get a grip. And as you said, API management maturity, a big part of that is governance. Of course, the lower levels, you need to be able to publish them, right? So have a gateway in the first place, not just put them out there and hope for the best. But as you progress through the maturity levels, at some point you absolutely need governance, and governance is only good if it covers 100% of your APIs. If you only cover 80%, you don't have governance. You have best effort, but that's it.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. This is one thing that I'm only repeating to my customers. If you want to start embracing an API, a truly API initiative in your company, start always by governance and governance with the whole landscape. Because sometimes they only people tend to think that the governance only applies to API products, but that's not true. Integration APIs also need some at some extent some kind of governance. And if you are not able to answer all those questions without phoning everything or everybody,
Yeah.
it's
No,
not.
I mean, it's like that, right? So, but what you find in reality is like a lot of companies also want to like shift left. I mean, that's always easy, right? If you want to be a CIO, it's always just shift left in every second sentence and you're basically done. But you want to shift left, so that means the developers start or have the ability to publish APIs themselves. So now what you're going to do now, you really have a governance task, because until you arrive at that point where you can shift left, what usually happens is the platform team does that on behalf of the developers. So again, there are phone calls, emails, what have you. I think we had one customer that actually where there's an Excel form that people need to fill out in order to get an API published and then send that over to the platform team. But the moment you want to automate that, you need to have your governance in place, and you need to have like all the security checks in place, and not only for like the first release, but for every release. Because if you don't have an automated governance, you cannot just shift left, because the developers are not the experts for your API gateway, right? If you just hand them the tools and say, okay, let's do it. You had that 2-hour training, that will be fine. That's great. That's just calling for trouble. So as you said, like governance is one of the topics that you absolutely need to have, but of course it's a boring topic, right? So you always have like the task of like telling people, look, it's not to just give us a reason to say no to anything you want, but it's actually to make sure we're safe, to make sure we manage our digital products well. But that is, I think, always the task, because with like things like boring things like governance, you don't earn money, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm a big fan of governance, and it's not boring. Yeah, but totally agree with you, Markus. It is actually like this, and if you not take the governance as serious and important, it's also you're far away from can introduce federation, because federation always comes with multiple steps of governance involved.
Especially as it enables you to have the same rules and the same processes across all these different gateways. So there's no excuse anymore, right? It's not like, oh, we can't do that because our gateway doesn't support it, or we can do that because our processes are a bit different than the other teams. So it's like you basically create a level playing field for everyone, and then you can just put your governance on top of that level playing field. So I'd argue federation makes it much easier to do a better API governance.
True.
Yeah.
Remarkable closing words in my
Yeah. Note that down. I mean, put that on the website.
Yes, absolutely. So, Markus, where is your next stop? Are there any other talks that you are going to, or what is your next destination?
Yeah, I'll be speaking at API or Nordic API Summit in Austin, Texas in March. So I think 11th to 13th, whoever wants to come. And after that, I think The next conference talks will probably be API Days, I think, then New York in May, London, and end of the year, probably Paris. And in between, whatever comes my way. So let's see. But I think these 4 are currently for sure.
So as you see, APIs are all over the world, I would say. So thank you very much that you were here. Also that you showed your product, and thank you also, David, Tim, and we will see us at the next podcast.
Thank you.
Goodbye.
Bye-bye.